yeah, we are not there where we want to be, not from the way we want to play, but the headlines, they are still there because we want to go proactive and we want to go dynamic, and also we want to play with a high line.
That's Erik Ten Hag speaking to Gary Neville on Sky Sports. A 30-minute interview that was released this morning. And what I want to do in this video is react to some key elements from it. 3 specific elements, really. Number 1, Erik Ten Hag speaking about the game model of Manchester United. Not just the first team, but the whole club. What's he done? Is it working? That's what Ineos are working on with Jason Wilcox. Number 2, what's the style of play this season? We already know that we know what the style of play is, it's just not exactly worked. And why hasn't it worked? And Erik Ten Hag's opinion on that. And also, a really good question from Gary. He said, why have you not just gone more defensive? All right. This interview, I think, gives some real insight. And by the end of it, this video, I'll explain my opinion on where I stand with what I think should happen next season. I've kind of been sitting on the fence for a while, but I think I've kind of made my decision now. Not just off the back of this interview, but I want to run through this interview because I think it's quite insightful. You don't normally get this sort of access with a Manchester United manager. And I think Gary Neville's the best in the business at asking the right questions. So Erik Ten Hag was asked about the game model, right? And he said that the game model's already here, speaks about Garnacho and Mainu coming through. That's because it was one of my objectives from the previous leadership team to bring that in. I think there's 2 things that he reiterates in this whole interview. He speaks about the game model and how that was a responsibility of his, and also speaks about the proactive approach and how that was a responsibility and a requirement from the old model. He's saying that's a structure that was laid out a couple of years ago. You're starting to see some dividends from it. When it comes to the under-18s team, and you watch them, honestly, you look at them and you're like, well, that looks like an Ajax team. An Ajax team that you would expect to see under Erik Ten Hag. They play with a higher press. They play compact. They play out from the back. They play transitional football very fast. Adam Lawrence has done a brilliant job there. But Erik Ten Hag, no doubt, has had involvement in, I would say, laying the principles. But in terms of the coaching and the execution, that's all down to Adam Lawrence. And you're starting to see some profits from that. Profits, revenues, that's what he's calling it. He's saying that we need more. He's speaking about the function of a technical director working on the game model. And he's saying the proof is there. Now, in the first team, I don't really think there's been that much proof. Sure, we've had the breakthroughs of Garnacho, who came under Ragnick, and Mainu. They've both been managed well by Erik Ten Hag. But more is needed, no doubt. And when it comes to the first team, when you compare the under-18s and the first team, it's like, well, the game model is obviously there with the youngsters. Why is it not there with the first team? And I think that's where we dive into this, which has been the crux of all the problems this season. Man United started play. Erik Ten Hag switched from the first season to this season. Went more proactive, wanted to be more dynamic, wanted to win the ball higher up the pitch, wanted to play with a higher line. It's just not happened. And it's been awful to watch. This is what Erik Ten Hag said when he's speaking about it. Speaking about the frustrations, being realistic, he goes, this year we wanted to make the next step. We brought in a goalkeeper who can play out from the back. In his eyes, a dynamic midfielder in Mason Mount who could play alongside Bruno and Højlund. On the one hand, we were confident we made the right choices, but this bit down here is interesting. I say interesting. It's kind of what we already know, I suppose. 47 games, 30 combinations in the back 4. Speaks about the injuries a lot. And also kind of reiterates this on more than one occasion. The left-footed centre-back, the left-sided full-back. And I think for a lot of United fans, it's kind of like, mate, make more of what you got. And I think the frustrations that so many United fans have about this team, and a lot of it recently, I've highlighted it in red there. Erik Ten Hag speaking about the improvements that we've made. The rules and the principles remain the same, but the patterns are not there. Well, you can't talk about this team from an improvement perspective right now. It's just not possible. There haven't really been any improvements. We've been less shit. Is that an improvement? I mean, technically that's an improvement. I understand that. But the frustrations of the majority of United fans are down to the fact, 2 things really. 1, well, actually, it's mainly about the football, isn't it? It's about how garbage we've been this season. And the good question I thought Gary Neville asked was this, why have you just not switched to a more pragmatic approach? Because we've done it before. Erik Ten Hag has done it before. First 2 seasons, last season, lost both. Went more direct, stopped playing out from the back with the ball. This season, away at Burnley, I think it was after an international break, we won 1-0. We went more compact. We scored a goal, and that was where I think Hannibal was man of the match in that game. Oh, no, I think it was Johnny Evans, actually. But United kept a clean sheet, and we stayed more resolute. But this interesting point here, right? Erik Ten Hag speaking about one of the objectives was the proactive style of play. And he's basically explaining there. He goes, I could adjust it. I could get these players to play, more defensive, sit deep. But when the players then return from injury, we're going to have to switch up the whole style again. So what's the point in that? I think he's basically saying he doesn't want to... He could put United into a more defensive shape, and it might make us more secure, but there's no guarantee we'd even win in that sense. So it almost feels like he's prepared to take the bullets and the hits of the losses that come with playing more proactive, even if it isn't working right now. That's the way that bit comes across. Go down here and there's a bit more. We're making improvements, but not enough. This bit is the bit that's killed me, in just personal, right? We have to get into a winning position and then bring it over the line. Because of all the things that have happened this season, and mate, we've been crap, massively, massively crap, all right? I'm not going to try and pretend otherwise. If we had just held on to our results in these last 6 weeks, the end of this season would have been very different. Certainly the sentiment would have been different. Have we not conceded in the last 2 minutes against Brentford? Have we not turned a 3-2 win against Chelsea into a 4-3 defeat? Have we held out against Liverpool for the last 20, which is the hardest of the lot, but we could have done it. Coventry, Burnley. Then I think the conversation, the sentiment towards the end of the season would have been very different. But it's full of anger now as a consequence. And I completely understand if you've checked out with Erik Ten Hag. And you know what? It does come down to faith at this point, and it does come down to belief. And it will come down to faith, and it will come down to belief of this man, of Jason Wilcox. It will come down to, do they believe Erik Ten Hag in this interview? Do they believe that if the injuries aren't there next season and you build a squad in the summer, that he can return this United team towards more what we saw in the first season compared to what we've seen in the second season? That's the question. And my honest opinion on that is, I've got my doubts. I really, really do. But I want Erik Ten Hag to get next season to find out. I think if I was to look at all the options that we've got out there, Thomas Tuchel is probably the most high caliber manager who's available, who would come with his own questions and concerns. And it may well work with Tuchel. I'm not saying it wouldn't, all right? I'm not saying it's going to work with Erik Ten Hag. But I want to see him working in that new environment. I want to believe that if we do nail this summer, all right, and I'm talking about players leaving, tons of players leaving. I'm talking about the right players being signed. Not 70 mil on Casemiro, not 80 mil on Anthony. I want to believe that Erik Ten Hag... Do I have complete faith that it will happen? No, I don't, all right? I'm wavering. I'm completely wavering. But I'm teetering on that side. I want Erik Ten Hag to get one more season. Maybe not a whole season, but I want Erik Ten Hag to be our manager come the start of next season. Will that change if we get annihilated in our next 4 games and lose the FA Cup final? Maybe. But as it stands now, yeah, a lot of it you can't explain logically. Truth be told, all right? There's so much energy I think you can fairly have against Erik Ten Hag. But next season, we're actually, for the first time since the Glazers took over, we're going to have a structure that actually encourages a coach to just be a coach. Do I have full belief in the game model that Ten Hag is building? I've got massive question marks about it, if I'm honest. Do I think that... A big question I've got in my mind is, next season, if Erik Ten Hag is still here, will he switch back to more what we saw in the first season? Or will he stick to what we haven't really worked with in the second season? Or will it be a hybrid of both? Will it be the best elements of the first season, the concept of the proactive style from the second season, with new signings in, with players leaving, and a better environment, and less injuries? Is that enough? I suppose we'll find out in the goodness of time, but I really want to know your reaction to that interview. I thought it was quite a good one, if I'm honest. I'm not changing my mind as a consequence of that interview. It's just that because that interview's come out, I suppose I'm prepared to sort of nail my colours to the mast. that how you say it? I don't know if I've got that completely wrong. Hey, look, I might be wildly wrong with Ten Hag, and I might regret my decision. But as it stands, I want to see him get one more season. Well, not necessarily a whole season, but I want to see him start as United's manager next season. And then come October, if it's not going in the right direction, then I would absolutely expect Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos to make a decision. You might disagree with me on this one. I understand that. But when it comes to managers and towards the end of their tenures at United, they were all done. I don't have that feeling towards Erik Ten Hag yet, even though this season has been atrocious.